Welcome to Ironwad Whispers, where imagination meets emotion, and every story leaves its mark. Where are you watching from? Share your city or country below. I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you want more powerful stories that capture your heart. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Once upon a time, a woman fleeing her cruel ex sought safety in the shadow of a billionaire she barely knew. What happened next was a revelation no one could have imagined. The Miami International Airport was chaos incarnate on that sweltering August afternoon, but Chloe Matthews had never been more grateful for crowds. She weaved through the throngs of travelers, her heart hammering against her ribs as she glanced over her shoulder for the dozenth time in as many minutes. Charles was here somewhere. She'd spotted him at the security checkpoint, his distinctive red hair impossible to miss even in the sea of humanity. After 18 months of freedom, her ex-boyfriend had found her again, and this time she could see the determination in his stance that meant he wouldn't give up easily. Chloe ducked into the first-class lounge, knowing she didn't have access but hoping the momentary refuge would buy her time to think. The cool air conditioning hit her flushed skin as she entered, and she immediately realized her mistake. The lounge was sparsely populated, making her stand out even more in her rumpled sundress and hastily packed carry-on. Before the attendant could challenge her presence, a deep voice cut through the ambient noise. "There you are, darling. I was beginning to think you'd gotten lost." She turned to find a man in an impeccable navy suit watching her with dark, calculating eyes, and something in his expression told her he knew exactly what he was doing. Elijah Finn had built his shipping empire by reading situations quickly and accurately, and the woman, who'd just burst into the first-class lounge, was clearly running from something or someone. At 35, he'd seen enough desperate people to recognize the signs. The constant checking over her shoulder, the white-knuckled grip on her bag, the way she'd frozen when the attendant moved toward her. What surprised him was his own instinct to help. Perhaps it was boredom from another tedious business trip, or perhaps it was the intriguing contrast between her obvious fear and the defiant tilt of her chin. Either way, he'd already committed to the charade by claiming her as his companion. "Play along," he murmured as she approached cautiously, his British accent barely detectable after years of conducting business in America. He guided her to his secluded corner table, noting how she positioned herself to watch the entrance. "Ex-husband," he guessed, pouring her a glass of water from the crystal pitcher. "Boyfriend," she corrected, her voice steadier than her hands. "Ex-boyfriend. Charles Weston. He's persistent." Elijah recognized the name. Western Industries had tried to muscle in on his Port of Miami operations last year. Small world. "Well then, Chloe," he said, reading her name from the luggage tag she hadn't quite hidden, "it seems we can help each other. I need a companion for a rather tedious business conference in Key West, and you need to disappear. Shall we make a deal?" What would you do in Chloe's position? Would you trust a complete stranger offering help, or would you take your chances alone? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Chloe studied the man across from her, trying to process his offer through the adrenaline still coursing through her system. Elijah Finn. She recognized him now from the business magazines Charles used to leave, scattered around their apartment. The shipping magnate who'd revolutionized global logistics through his company, Poseidon Global Transport. Worth billions, famously single, and notoriously ruthless in business. Yet here he was, offering her an escape route with no apparent strings attached. "What's in it for you?" she asked, proud that her voice didn't shake. "I don't even know you. Why would you help me?" "Because, Miss Matthews, I'm catastrophically bored," Elijah admitted with a self-deprecating smile that transformed his stern features. "I have a week of mind-numbing meetings ahead with people who will either grovel or try to stab me in the back, metaphorically speaking. Having a mysterious companion will at least give them something else to gossip about. Plus, his expression hardened slightly. I have my own reasons for disliking Charles Weston. Consider it a mutually beneficial arrangement. You get a week of protection and anonymity. I get a shield against the matchmaking mothers who infest these events. Simple. 20 minutes later, Chloe found herself in the back of Elijah's chartered jet, still trying to understand how her life had taken such a surreal turn. She'd accepted his offer partly out of desperation, and partly because something in his eyes suggested he was genuinely trying to help, despite his claims of self-interest. As the plane lifted off, she saw Charles's red hair through the terminal windows below, his face turned up to watch the departing flights. A shiver ran through her despite the warm cabin. "He can't hurt you now," Elijah said quietly from across the aisle, not looking up from his laptop. "My security team will ensure he doesn't follow us to Key West." "You don't understand," Chloe said, sinking deeper into the leather seat that probably cost more than her car. "Charles doesn't give up. Ever. I moved across the country, changed jobs, and he still found me. He's convinced we're meant to be together, that I'm just confused." She laughed bitterly. "Confused about the bruises, I suppose. About the constant monitoring, the accusations. The way he slowly cut me off from everyone I cared about." She hadn't meant to reveal so much, but something about being 30,000 feet in the air with a stranger made the words tumble out. Elijah finally looked up, and she was surprised to see genuine anger flash across his features, not at her, but for her. The Key West resort was a paradise of swaying palms and ocean breezes, but Chloe barely noticed the beauty as Elijah's assistant efficiently checked them in. The suite he'd booked had 2 bedrooms separated by a spacious living area, and he made a point of showing her the locks on her door. "Your privacy is yours," he said simply. "I may be using this situation to my advantage, but I'm not a monster. You're safe here." The kindness in his voice, so at odds with his reputation, made her throat tight with unexpected emotion. When had someone last made her feel safe? That evening, as they prepared for the welcome reception, Elijah knocked on her door with a garment bag. "I took the liberty of having my assistant arrange some appropriate attire," he said, looking almost embarrassed. "These events have an unfortunate dress code. Please don't take it as any commentary on your own clothes." Inside were several designer dresses, all in her size, all tasteful and elegant. Chloe fingered the silk of a deep blue cocktail dress, wondering when she'd fallen through the looking glass. "Thank you," she managed. "I'll pay you back." "You'll do no such thing," he interrupted. "Consider it combat gear. We're going into battle against some of the most boring people in the maritime industry. We need all the armor we can get." Walking into the reception on Elijah's arm felt surreal, like playing a part in someone else's life. He briefed her on the basics during the drive over. She was a freelance travel writer he'd met at a charity auction. They'd been seeing each other quietly for 2 months. She was accompanying him to get a feel for the shipping industry for an article. Simple, plausible, hard to verify. What he hadn't prepared her for was how naturally they seemed to fit together, how his hand at the small of her back guided her through the crowd with practiced ease, how he somehow knew to order her a gin and tonic with extra lime without asking. "Elijah, and who is this enchanting creature?" A silver-haired woman descended upon them, dripping diamonds and curiosity. "Vivian Hartley," Elijah murmured in Chloe's ear. "Owns the second-largest container fleet on the East Coast and gossips like she's paid for it. Aloud," he said smoothly. "Vivian, may I present Chloe Matthews? Chloe, this is Vivian Hartley, one of my more tolerable competitors." Chloe extended her hand, channeling every bit of poise she'd learned during her brief stint in public relations before Charles had convinced her to quit. Mrs. Hartley, Elijah's told me so much about your innovative refrigerated shipping solutions. I'd love to hear more for my article. Vivian preened, immediately launching into a detailed explanation, and Chloe caught Elijah's approving nod. She could do this. She could be someone else for a week. By the time they returned to the suite, Chloe's feet ached from the unfamiliar heels, and her face hurt from smiling. But she felt more alive than she had in years. "You were brilliant," Elijah said, loosening his tie as he poured them both a nightcap from the suite's bar. "Vivian will be singing your praises to everyone tomorrow. You've given me something I haven't had at these events in years: credibility as an actual human being, rather than just a profit machine." He handed her a glass of wine, their fingers brushing briefly. "Though I must ask, how did you know about her refrigerated shipping?" That was rather specific. Chloe felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I may have Googled everyone on the attendee list while you were in the shower," she admitted. "Old habit from my PR days. Know your audience, control the narrative." She took a sip of wine, letting the expensive vintage calm her nerves. "Charles hated that about me. Said I was too prepared, too calculating, that it wasn't feminine." She hadn't meant to mention Charles again, but Elijah just nodded thoughtfully. "Intelligence is threatening to weak men," he said simply. "Though I must say, having a partner who actually prepares for these events is a novel experience. Usually, my dates spend the evening trying to calculate my net worth or planning our imaginary wedding. They talked until well past midnight, the conversation flowing as easily as the wine. Elijah told her about building his empire from a single rusty cargo ship inherited from his grandfather, about the cutthroat world of international shipping, and the satisfaction of seeing his vessels in ports around the world. Chloe found herself sharing more than she'd intended, about her abandoned dreams of writing, the way Charles had slowly isolated her from her support system, the night she'd finally run with nothing but her car and whatever she could fit in 2 suitcases. "Why Key West?" Elijah asked eventually. "When you left him, why Florida?" "Because it was as far as I could get from Seattle without leaving the country," Chloe admitted. "And because I'd read somewhere that Key West was where people went to disappear, to reinvent themselves." Seemed appropriate. She gestured toward the window, where the ocean glittered under the moon. "Plus, no one expects someone from the Pacific Northwest to hide in humidity this oppressive. Charles always said I complained too much about the heat." She realized she'd been talking about Charles all evening and winced. "I'm sorry. You don't want to hear about my pathetic relationship drama. You're being incredibly kind, and I'm repaying you by treating you like a therapist." "You're not pathetic," Elijah said firmly, setting down his empty glass. "You're a survivor. There's a difference." He stood to leave, then paused at her bedroom door. "Chloe, I need you to understand something. What I said earlier about being bored, that was only partly true. I helped you because I recognized something in your eyes. The same look I had when I was 22 and running from a father who believed fists were an acceptable form of communication." The admission hung between them, raw and unexpected. "So no, you're not pathetic. You're brave. And tomorrow, we're going to make sure everyone at that conference knows you're under my protection. Charles Weston won't come near you again." Chloe felt tears prick her eyes at his fierce declaration. When was the last time someone had stood up for her, protected her without wanting something in return? "Thank you," she whispered. And Elijah nodded once before disappearing into his room. She lay awake for hours afterward, trying to reconcile the man who'd just shared his own painful past with the ruthless billionaire the business magazines described. There were layers to Elijah Finn, she realized, and despite her better judgment, she wanted to uncover them all. Chloe woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Elijah's voice, low and authoritative coming from the living area. She wrapped herself in the plush resort robe and ventured out to find him on a video call, multiple screens displaying shipping routes and cargo manifests. He held up a finger, mouthed, 1 minute, and she helped herself to coffee from the elaborate spread that had appeared on the dining table. Fresh fruit, pastries, eggs Benedict, enough food for a small army. "No, Harrison, we're not rerouting through Panama just to save 12 hours, Elijah was saying. The crew needs the rest, and I won't compromise safety for speed. When he finally ended the call, he looked almost sheepish. "Apologies. Crisis at the port of Long Beach." "Did you sleep well?" Chloe nodded, still adjusting to the surreal domesticity of sharing breakfast with a billionaire. "Better than I have in months, actually. Thank you for everything. The clothes, the room, the protection. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Elijah poured himself coffee, considering her words. "Actually, there is something you could do. These conferences involve numerous social events, dinners, yacht parties, the insufferable golf tournament. Having you there, genuinely engaged and interested, would make them bearable. Plus," he smiled slightly, "you're the first person to make Vivian Hartley stop talking about herself in the 5 years I've known her. That alone is worth your weight in gold. I can't keep borrowing clothes from your apparently magical assistant," Chloe protested after breakfast, gesturing at the designer dress she'd worn the night before. Elijah checked his watch, then made a decision that seemed to surprise even him. "You're right. Let's go shopping. I have 2 hours before the maritime law seminar, which I can afford to miss because I already know everything they'll say." Within minutes, they were in his rented Mercedes, heading toward Key West's shopping district. Chloe expected him to drop her off with a credit card and instructions, the way Charles had always done when he wanted her to look appropriate for his business dinners. Instead, Elijah parked and walked with her into the first boutique, where he proved to have surprisingly good taste and strong opinions about color. "Not the yellow," he said firmly when she emerged from the dressing room. "It washes you out. Try the coral instead." She should have been offended by his directness, but there was something refreshing about his honesty. Charles had always made her guess what he wanted, punishing her later if she chose wrong. Elijah simply stated his opinion and waited for her to make her own choice. By the third store, they'd developed an easy rhythm, and Chloe found herself actually enjoying the experience. "You're not what I expected," she told him, as he carried her bags without complaint. "What did you expect? Someone who'd throw money at problems without getting his hands dirty. Not someone who'd spend his morning helping me find the perfect sundress." That afternoon's event was a cocktail party on Vivian Hartley's 200-foot yacht, and Chloe felt her nerves return as they boarded. The vessel was packed with industry titans and their perfectly polished companions, all air kisses and calculating smiles. She unconsciously moved closer to Elijah, who steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Remember," he murmured, "half these people are borderline criminals who just haven't been caught yet. The other half are too drunk to remember their own names. You have nothing to prove to any of them." His irreverence made her laugh, earning them curious looks from nearby guests. Elijah Finn with a sense of humor. "Will wonders never cease?" A statuesque blonde approached them, her smile sharp as a blade. "Miranda Cross," Elijah said coolly. "I didn't realize you were attending." Chloe recognized the undertone immediately. This was an ex-girlfriend. Miranda's assessment of her was thorough and dismissive, clearly finding her wanting. "And you must be the little writer everyone's talking about. How quaint." Before Chloe could respond, Elijah stepped smoothly between them. "What's quaint is thinking anyone cares about your opinion, Miranda. If you'll excuse us, I promise to show Chloe the navigation equipment." He guided Chloe away, tension radiating from his shoulders. I apologize for that. Miranda and I had a brief arrangement that ended when I caught her photographing confidential documents. They found refuge on the upper deck, away from the crowd. The sun was setting, painting the ocean in shades of gold and crimson, and for a moment they just stood in comfortable silence. "You handled that well," Elijah said finally. "Miranda has reduced grown men to tears with less provocation." Chloe shrugged, though her heart was still racing from the confrontation. "I lived with Charles for 3 years. I'm used to people trying to make me feel small." She turned to face him, studying his profile in the dying light. "Can I ask you something? Why did you really help me at the airport? And don't say boredom again." Elijah was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Then, my mother spent 15 years hiding from my father, moving constantly, always looking over her shoulder, never able to settle anywhere long enough to build a life. I was 8 when he finally found us." His jaw tightened. "I couldn't help her then. I was too young, too weak. But when I saw you in that lounge, saw that same hunted look—" He trailed off, but Chloe understood. They stood closer now, drawn together by shared understanding. And when the yacht's horn sounded to signal dinner, neither of them moved immediately. The formal dinner that evening was at an exclusive restaurant overlooking the harbor, and Chloe was pleased to find herself seated between Elijah and a friendly Japanese executive who was passionate about sustainable shipping practices. She held her own in the conversation, drawing on her research and genuine curiosity about the industry. Elijah watched her with something like pride as she charmed the executive into discussing a potential partnership with his company. "Your companion is quite knowledgeable," the man told Elijah. "You are fortunate to have found someone who shares your interests." Elijah's response surprised them both. "I'm beginning to realize just how fortunate." Halfway through dinner, Chloe's phone buzzed. She'd been ignoring it all day, but something made her check it now. 27. Missed calls from Charles. 15 text messages escalating from concern to threatening. Her hands started shaking, and Elijah noticed immediately. "Excuse us," he said, smoothly to the table, helping her to her feet. "Chloe's not feeling well. The heat, you understand." He guided her outside, where she could gulp the fresh air. "He knows I'm in Florida," she gasped. "He's tracking my credit cards. God, I'm so stupid. I should have thought—" "Hey," Elijah said firmly, taking her shoulders. "Look at me, you're not stupid, and he can't touch you here. Tomorrow, we'll get you new cards, a new phone, whatever you need. Tonight, you're safe. I promise." Back in their suite, Elijah poured her a brandy while she curled up on the sofa, exhausted from the emotional whiplash of the day. "I'm ruining your conference," she said miserably. "You should be networking, making deals, not babysitting a woman with a stalker ex-boyfriend." Elijah sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "Actually, you've made this the most productive conference I've attended in years." "That Japanese executive? He's been dodging my calls for 6 months. 20 minutes with you, and he's ready to sign a partnership agreement." He paused, considering his next words. "Besides, I meant what I said. I'm invested in keeping you safe now." Charles Weston made that personal when he decided to hunt you down. "Why do you hate him?" Chloe asked, emboldened by brandy and exhaustion. "You mentioned having your own reasons for disliking him." Elijah's expression darkened. "He tried to sabotage one of my ships 2 years ago. Bribed a crew member to report false safety violations, hoping to delay a crucial shipment and steal my contract. The crew member confessed, but I could never prove Charles ordered it." He smiled grimly. "Let's just say I've been waiting for an opportunity to return the favor. Protecting you from him? That's just a bonus." The next day brought a new crisis. Charles had arrived in Key West. Elijah's security team spotted him at the marina, asking questions about conference attendees. "Pack your things," Elijah ordered, already on the phone with his assistant. "We're moving to my yacht. It's more secure, and we can leave quickly if necessary." Chloe wanted to protest, to insist she could handle this on her own, but the memory of Charles's increasingly unhinged messages stopped her. She was tired of running, tired of being afraid. Maybe it was time to accept help. Elijah's yacht made Vivian's look modest. The Poseidon's Dream was a floating palace, all gleaming teak and cutting-edge technology. "Your cabin?" Elijah showed her to a stateroom bigger than her apartment. "The crew has been vetted, the security is military grade, and we can be in international waters in 30 minutes if needed." He paused at her door. "I know this is overwhelming, but I won't let him hurt you." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made something flutter in Chloe's chest. This was dangerous territory, developing feelings for a man who was essentially her bodyguard, even if he was a devastatingly handsome billionaire who made her feel safe for the first time in years. "Do you think Chloe is developing real feelings for Elijah, or is it just gratitude for his protection? Have you ever found love in an unexpected situation? Let us know your story in the comments." The next morning, Chloe woke to the gentle rocking of the yacht and the smell of fresh coffee. She found Elijah on the deck, laptop open, conducting business as if hosting a woman fleeing her ex was perfectly normal. "Good morning," he said, closing the laptop as she approached. "Sleep well?" She had, surprisingly. The boat's motion had been soothing, and knowing Elijah was just down the hall had brought unexpected comfort. "Better than I have in months." "Again?" She accepted the coffee he poured, their fingers brushing. "I'm starting to make a habit of that around you." Their peaceful morning was shattered when security reported movement on the dock. Charles was there, arguing with marina security, demanding to know which boats belonged to conference attendees. Even from a distance, Chloe could see the manic energy in his movements, the wild gestures she remembered too well. "We should leave," she said, hating how small her voice sounded. "Go to the conference without me. I'll stay here with the crew." "Absolutely not," Elijah said firmly. "We go together or not at all. Besides," he smiled slightly, "I have a better idea. How do you feel about making a grand entrance?" An hour later, they arrived at the conference center in Elijah's Bentley, flanked by discreet security. Chloe wore a stunning red dress that made her feel powerful, and Elijah looked every inch the billionaire mogul in his charcoal suit. As they entered the main hall, heads turned and conversations stopped. "Let him see you," Elijah murmured. "Let him see you're not hiding, not running. You're here, under my protection, and everyone in this room knows what that means." His hand was warm on her back, steadying and possessive in equal measure. Charles was indeed there, having somehow talked his way in as a potential vendor. His face went through several expressions when he spotted them: surprise, anger, and something darker. He started toward them, but Elijah's security team materialized as if from nowhere, creating a subtle but effective barrier. "Mr. Weston," Elijah said coolly when Charles got within speaking distance. "I heard you were looking for Miss Matthews. As you can see, she's perfectly fine and has no wish to speak with you. I suggest you leave before security escorts you out." Charles's face flushed ugly red. "She's my fiancée. We had a misunderstanding." "Ex-girlfriend," Chloe corrected, proud when her voice didn't shake. "And the only misunderstanding was me thinking you'd ever change." The confrontation drew attention, and Elijah used it to their advantage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he addressed the growing crowd, his arm now firmly around Chloe's waist. "I apologize for the disturbance. Mr. Weston seems to be having difficulty accepting that Miss Matthews has moved on. Security, please escort him out." As Charles was led away, shouting threats about lawsuits and ownership, Elijah turned to Chloe. "You did beautifully," he said softly, and impulsively kissed her forehead. The gesture, small but intimate, sent murmurs through the crowd. They'd just publicly declared themselves as a couple, Chloe realized. The fake relationship had taken on a very real dimension. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. News of Elijah Finn's new girlfriend, and the dramatic scene with her ex, spread through the conference like wildfire. Suddenly, everyone wanted to meet Chloe, to hear about her writing, to invite them both to private dinners and exclusive events. "I've created a monster," Elijah said dryly during a break. "You're now the most interesting thing to happen to maritime shipping since containerization," Chloe laughed, feeling oddly liberated. "I don't know. I think I like being interesting. It's better than being invisible." The look Elijah gave her then was so intense, she had to look away, afraid of what she might see in his eyes, or what he might see in hers. That evening, Elijah cancelled their dinner plans, declaring they'd had enough of people for one day. Instead, he cooked for her in the yacht's state-of-the-art galley, revealing yet another unexpected skill. "My grandfather taught me," he explained, expertly filleting fresh fish. Said a man who couldn't feed himself was no man at all. Of course, he also said a man who couldn't navigate by the stars was worthless, so his standards were fairly specific. They ate on the deck, watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. It felt dangerously domestic, dangerously right. "Thank you," Chloe said, as they lingered over wine. "For today, for standing up to Charles, for making me feel visible." Elijah studied her in the fading light. "You were always visible, Chloe. Charles just tried to convince you otherwise." He paused, seeming to wage an internal battle. "Can I tell you something? These past few days, I haven't felt this alive in years. You make me remember why I started all this. Not for money or power, but for the freedom to live life on my own terms." The admission hung between them, heavy with implication. They were walking a dangerous line between pretense and reality, and Chloe wasn't sure which side she wanted to be on anymore. That night, a tropical storm rolled in, setting the yacht rocking more dramatically than usual. Chloe lay awake, listening to the wind howl and rain lash against the windows. A particularly violent wave sent something crashing in her cabin, and before she could think about it, she was padding down the hall to Elijah's stateroom. She knocked softly, and he answered immediately, as if he too had been lying awake. "I'm sorry," she began, but he was already opening the door wider. "Come in. This is your first storm at sea, isn't it?" His cabin was larger than hers, dominated by a king-size bed and panoramic windows showing the churning ocean. "It's actually quite safe," he assured her, gesturing for her to sit in one of the chairs. "The yacht is designed for much worse than this, but I understand it can be unsettling." They talked quietly as the storm raged, and somehow Chloe found herself on the bed beside him, still maintaining careful distance, but drawing comfort from his presence. "Charles hated storms," she said sleepily. "Said they made me clingy," Elijah snorted. "Charles is an idiot. There's nothing wrong with seeking comfort during a storm." When she woke the next morning, she was curled against his chest, his arm around her protectively. They'd crossed a line, but neither seemed inclined to step back. Neither of them mentioned waking up intertwined, but something had fundamentally shifted between them. Their touches lingered longer, their glances held more weight, their banter took on a flirtatious edge that had nothing to do with their charade. At that day's conference sessions, they moved in perfect sync, anticipating each other's needs without words. "You two are disgustingly in tune," Vivian Hartley observed at lunch. "How long did you say you'd been together?" The lie came easily now. 2 months, but the feelings behind it were becoming increasingly real. That afternoon brought good news. Charles had been arrested for harassment and trespassing after attempting to board Elijah's yacht. He'd be held for at least 48 hours, giving them breathing room. "We should celebrate," Elijah declared. "There's a beach club I know, away from the conference crowd." "Dancing, good rum, no shop talk allowed." Chloe agreed, trying to ignore how much it sounded like a real date. The line between fake and real had blurred beyond recognition, and she was no longer sure she wanted to find it again. The beach club was everything Elijah promised: intimate, authentic, filled with locals rather than tourists. A live band played salsa music, and couples swayed on the sand dance floor under string lights. "I should warn you," Elijah said as he led her onto the floor. "I'm an excellent dancer. My mother insisted on lessons, said it was the one social skill that would never go out of style." He wasn't exaggerating. Chloe had taken her own lessons years ago before Charles convinced her dancing was frivolous, and muscle memory kicked in as Elijah spun her expertly. They danced for hours, moving from salsa to bachata to slow songs that had them pressed close, breathing the same air. "This is dangerous," Chloe murmured, during one particularly intimate dance. "What is?" Elijah asked, though his eyes said he knew exactly what she meant. "This, us, pretending something that's starting to feel very real." He pulled her closer instead of pulling away. "Who says we're pretending anymore?" The question hung between them as the song ended, but before Chloe could answer, Elijah was kissing her. Not for show, not for an audience, but because he wanted to. Because she wanted him to. The fake relationship had officially become something else entirely. That first real kiss. Were you rooting for them to get together? When do you think Elijah truly started falling for Chloe? Was it from the beginning, or did it grow gradually? Share your thoughts below. They didn't sleep together. Elijah was too much of a gentleman, and Chloe too wary of complicating things further. But the kiss changed everything. The next morning brought awkwardness neither had anticipated. "We should talk," Elijah said over breakfast, but Chloe wasn't ready. "About the conference schedule?" "I agree. What time is the sustainability panel?" He accepted her deflection with grace, but she caught him watching her throughout the day with an expression she couldn't decipher. Were they still pretending? Was this still about protecting her from Charles? Or had they stumbled into something neither had planned? The day's events provided welcome distraction. Chloe found herself genuinely engaged in a discussion about reducing carbon emissions in shipping, contributing ideas that impressed even skeptical industry veterans. "Your girlfriend has a good head on her shoulders," one CEO told Elijah. "Better lock that down before someone steals her away." The casual assumption that she was Elijah's to lock down should have bothered her, but Elijah's response surprised her. "Chloe makes her own choices. I'm just grateful she's choosing to be here." It was the perfect answer, respectful and modern, and it made her heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with their pretense. That evening, Elijah had a private meeting with potential investors, giving Chloe time alone to think. She walked along the marina, trying to sort through her tangled emotions. In less than a week, she'd gone from running scared to kissing a billionaire who made her feel safe and valued. It was too fast, too complicated, too good to be true. Her phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. Against her better judgment, she answered. It wasn't Charles, but his mother, Eleanor. "Chloe, dear, I'm so worried about Charles. He's not himself. Can't you just talk to him? He loves you so much." The familiar guilt trip made Chloe's stomach turn, but she held firm. "Eleanor, Charles is in jail for stalking me." "That's not love, it's obsession. Please don't contact me again." She ended the call to find Elijah standing nearby, his expression thunderous. "How long has his family been enabling him?" Chloe sighed. "Forever." They think love means never saying no, never setting boundaries. I'm the villain for not understanding his passion. Elijah pulled her into his arms, and she let herself lean into his strength. You're not the villain. You're the hero of your own story. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Standing there in his embrace, Chloe realized she was falling for him. Not the billionaire, not her protector, but the man who cooked her dinner and danced with her and made her feel like she deserved good things. It was terrifying and exhilarating, and probably a terrible idea, but she couldn't seem to stop it. The next day brought the conference's signature event, a yacht race for charity. Elijah had entered every year but never won, primarily because he insisted on sailing himself rather than hiring professional crew. "Will you be my first mate?" he asked Chloe. "Fair warning, I'm competitive and possibly insufferable during races." She agreed, charmed by this glimpse of boyish enthusiasm. They spent the morning preparing, and Elijah taught her basic sailing maneuvers with patience that belied his supposed competitiveness. "You're a natural," he said, as she successfully executed a tack. Must be those Seattle maritime genes. The race itself was exhilarating. They worked in perfect harmony, Chloe anticipating Elijah's needs and following his commands without hesitation. They were in third place when the wind shifted, and Elijah made a risky decision to change course. "Trust me," he said, and she did, helping him execute a maneuver that put them in the lead. They crossed the finish line first, both soaked with spray and grinning like fools. As they celebrated with champagne on the dock, surrounded by congratulating competitors, Chloe realized she'd never felt more alive. "We make a good team," Elijah said, pulling her close for the cameras. "The best," she agreed, and meant it in ways that had nothing to do with sailing. Their victory celebration was interrupted by unexpected news. Charles had been released on bail and immediately fled the state, violating his bond. "He's running," Elijah's security chief reported. "Probably heading back to Seattle. He won't be bothering you again anytime soon." Chloe should have felt relieved, but instead she felt oddly deflated. Without the threat of Charles. What excuse did she have to stay with Elijah? As if reading her thoughts, Elijah dismissed his security chief and turned to her. "This doesn't change anything," he said firmly. "The conference isn't over, and we have plans, unless you want to leave. Do you want me to leave?" Chloe countered, her heart in her throat. They stood facing each other on the dock, the party continuing around them but feeling miles away. "No," Elijah said simply. "I want you to stay. Not because of Charles, not because of the conference, but because I can't imagine watching you walk away." The admission broke something open between them. "I don't want to leave either," Chloe whispered. "But Elijah, I'm a mess. I'm literally fleeing a toxic relationship. You're a billionaire with a reputation to protect. This is insane." He stepped closer, cupping her face gently. "Maybe insane is what we both need. I've been sane and sensible for years, and it's left me successful but alone. You make me want to take risks again." That night, they finally stopped pretending. Over dinner at a tiny Cuban restaurant away from the conference crowd, they talked honestly about what was happening between them. "I didn't expect this," Chloe admitted. "When you offered to help me at the airport, I thought you were just another rich guy playing games. But you're so much more than that." Elijah reached across the table to take her hand. "And you're so much more than someone who needs protecting. You're brilliant, brave, funny. You've made this week the best I've had in years." They talked until the restaurant closed, then walked along the beach under the stars, finally free to be themselves without pretense. "What happens when the conference ends?" Chloe asked as they sat on the sand, her head on his shoulder. "We go back to the real world," Elijah said. "But I want you in my real world. Come to Miami, not to hide, not because you need protection, but because I want to see where this goes." It was a huge leap, but Chloe found herself nodding. "Okay, but I need to find my own place, my own job. I won't be a kept woman." Elijah laughed. "I wouldn't expect anything less. Though I should warn you, I plan to pursue you properly now. Flowers, dinners, the whole ridiculous romance package." "I think I can handle that," Chloe said, turning to kiss him under the stars. The conference's final day arrived too quickly. Chloe attended the closing gala in a stunning silver gown Elijah had surprised her with, feeling like she truly belonged there. The week had transformed her from a frightened woman on the run to someone confident and hopeful about the future. "You're glowing," Vivian Hartley observed. "Love suits you, dear. Both of you." Looking at Elijah across the room, deep in conversation, but constantly aware of her location, Chloe couldn't disagree. Love. Was that what this was? It seemed too soon, too fast, but her heart didn't seem to care about reasonable timelines. During the final toast, Elijah surprised everyone by acknowledging her publicly. "This conference has been particularly memorable thanks to someone special," he said, finding her eyes in the crowd. "Chloe Matthews came into my life unexpectedly and reminded me that there's more to success than profit margins, to new partnerships in business and in life." The room erupted in applause, and Chloe felt tears prick her eyes. He'd just declared himself in front of his entire professional world. There was no going back now, and she found she didn't want to. 2 weeks later, Chloe stood in her new Miami apartment, boxes scattered around her, still hardly believing how much her life had changed. True to his word, Elijah had helped her find her own place, a charming one-bedroom in Coconut Grove, and hadn't protested when she insisted on paying her own rent. She'd also landed a job at a maritime trade publication, putting her PR skills and newfound shipping knowledge to use. "I still think you should have let me find you something in my building," Elijah said, helping her unpack. "And have everyone think I'm your kept woman." "No, thank you." But she softened the rejection with a kiss, still marveling at the freedom to do so. They'd been officially dating for 2 weeks, and it felt both completely natural and utterly surreal. Elijah courted her with old-fashioned dedication. Flowers delivered to her office, surprise lunches, evening walks along the bay. But he also respected her independence, understanding her need to build her own life after years of being controlled. "I'm falling in love with you," he told her one evening, as they cooked dinner together in her tiny kitchen. "I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, but I need you to know—" Chloe's hands stilled on the vegetables she was chopping. "I'm falling for you too," she admitted. "It terrifies me, but it's also the most right thing I've felt in years." Their bubble of happiness burst a month later when Charles resurfaced. He'd been arrested in Seattle for violating a restraining order against another ex-girlfriend, and somehow blamed Chloe for his downward spiral. His emails were forwarded by her old attorney, rambling, accusatory, threatening legal action for defamation and alienation of affection. "He's delusional," Elijah said, reading the emails with barely controlled fury. "We need to increase security again," but Chloe was tired of running, tired of being afraid. "No, I'm done letting him control my life. Let him rant. He's in jail in Seattle and I'm here living my life. He has no power over me anymore." Still, the reminder of her past cast a shadow over their relationship. Chloe found herself pulling back slightly, afraid of depending too much on Elijah, afraid of losing herself again. Elijah noticed, of course. "Talk to me," he urged one evening when she'd been particularly distant. "I can see you retreating, and it's killing me." So she told him about her fears, about how Charles had started out protective too, how she'd lost herself so gradually she hadn't noticed until it was almost too late. Elijah listened without interrupting, then pulled her close. "I'm not him. he said simply. I want to be your partner, not your keeper. Your strength is what attracted me in the first place. I'd never want to diminish that. 3 months into their relationship, Elijah invited Chloe to meet his mother in Boston. Fair warning, he said on the plane. She's going to love you immediately and start planning our wedding. Try not to hold it against me. Chloe was nervous, but curious to meet the woman who'd raised Elijah, who'd fled abuse and built a new life just as Chloe was doing. Eleanor Finn turned out to be a tiny powerhouse of a woman with her son's dark eyes and an iron will that had clearly been passed down. So you're the one who's got my son smiling in all his photos, she said, embracing Chloe warmly. About time someone cracked that workaholic shell. The visit was wonderful and overwhelming in equal measure. Eleanor shared embarrassing stories about young Elijah, showed Chloe photo albums, and not so subtly pointed out that the Finn family engagement ring would look lovely on her finger. "Mother," Elijah protested, but he was smiling. "We've only been together 3 months. When you know, Eleanor said sagely. I knew your father was wrong for me in 3 minutes and stayed for 15 years. I knew Harold was right for me in 3 weeks, and we had 30 beautiful years before cancer took him. Time means nothing. Connection is everything." Looking at Elijah across his mother's dining table, seeing him relaxed and laughing with the 2 women he loved, Chloe had to agree. Elijah's work took him to Singapore for 2 weeks, the longest they'd been apart since the conference. Chloe threw herself into her own work, determined to prove she could thrive independently even while missing him terribly. They video called daily, the time difference making for odd conversations at dawn and midnight. "I hate this," Elijah admitted on day 10. "I've done this trip a dozen times and never minded the solitude. Now my suite feels empty without you arguing with me about what to watch on TV." Chloe laughed, curled up in her own empty bed. "I miss you too, even your terrible habit of stealing all the blankets." The separation clarified things for both of them. When Elijah returned, jet-lagged but eager, he swept her into his arms at the airport like a scene from a movie. "Move in with me," he said against her hair. "Not because you need to, not because it's convenient, but because I want to wake up with you every morning and come home to you every night." Chloe pulled back to look at him. "Are you sure? That's a big step." "I've never been more sure of anything," he said. "I love you, Chloe Matthews. I want to build a life with you." Standing in the middle of Miami International Airport, surrounded by travelers and chaos, Chloe said yes. Moving in together was an adjustment. Elijah's penthouse was magnificent, but felt like a museum, all clean lines and expensive art. "We need to make this ours," Chloe declared, and Elijah gave her free rein to redecorate. Soon, colorful throw pillows appeared on the austere sofas, plants filled the sterile corners, and photos of their adventures covered previously bare surfaces. "It looks lived in," Elijah said one evening, surveying the changes. "I love it. They learned each other's rhythms." Chloe needed coffee before conversation. Elijah required absolute silence during his morning financial reviews. They fought about stupid things, like toilet paper direction, and profound things like future plans, but always with respect and resolution. "I've never lived with a woman before," Elijah admitted one night as they did dishes together. "Never wanted to. My space was my sanctuary. And now?" Chloe asked, bumping his hip with hers. "Now I can't imagine coming home to an empty house." "You've ruined my solitude, Matthews." She laughed, flicking soap suds at him. "Good. Someone needed to—" Their domestic life felt easy, natural, like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. Even their friends noticed the change. "You're different," Vivian told Elijah at a shipping industry event. "Lighter, happier. That girl's been good for you." Looking across the room at Chloe, who was animatedly discussing environmental regulations with a group of executives, Elijah couldn't agree more. 6 months after moving in together, Elijah started planning. He'd bought the ring after their trip to Boston, his mother's words about knowing when you know echoing in his head. But Chloe deserved more than a rushed proposal. She deserved romance, certainty, and most importantly the knowledge that this was about them, not about him saving her. He enlisted his assistant, Maria, who'd become friends with Chloe. "It needs to be perfect," he insisted. "Not flashy, not public, but perfect for her." Maria rolled her eyes fondly. "Mr. Finn, you could propose in a gas station bathroom and Chloe would say yes. She loves you, not your grand gestures." But Elijah persisted, planning every detail. He knew Chloe loved the sunrise. She'd dragged him out of bed countless times to watch it from their balcony. He knew she preferred experiences to things, memories to material goods, and he knew she'd want something intimate, just between them, without the pressure of public spectacle. The plan formed slowly: a sunrise sail to a private island they'd discovered, breakfast on the beach, and a question that would change both their lives. He just had to wait for the perfect moment, which proved harder than any business deal he'd ever negotiated. The perfect moment almost came too late. Charles, out on parole, made one last desperate attempt to contact Chloe. He showed up at her office, calm and seemingly rational, claiming he just wanted closure. Security called Elijah immediately, and he arrived to find Chloe handling the situation with remarkable poise. "I'm happy now, Charles," she was saying. "I hope you can find happiness too, but it won't be with me. Please don't contact me again." Charles looked between her and Elijah, something finally seeming to click. "You really love him," he said, sounding surprised. "Yes," Chloe said simply, "and he loves me. The real me, not some version he's trying to create." After Charles left, peacefully, surprisingly, Chloe collapsed into Elijah's arms. "I'm okay," she assured him. "Actually, I'm better than okay. I faced him without fear. I'm really free now." Watching her strength, her grace under pressure, Elijah knew he couldn't wait any longer. "Marry me," he blurted out, right there in her office parking lot. Chloe laughed, tears streaming down her face. "Elijah Finn, are you seriously proposing in a parking lot after my ex just left?" He grinned sheepishly. "Too soon? Ask me again properly," she said, kissing him. "With a ring and a plan, and preferably somewhere more romantic than beside the dumpster." "Deal," he agreed, already mentally adjusting his perfect proposal timeline. 2 weeks later, Elijah woke Chloe at 4 a.m. "Trust me," he said, handing her sailing clothes. She grumbled but complied, following him to the marina where his yacht waited. As they sailed into the sunrise, Chloe gradually woke up, enchanted by the colors painting the sky. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "Not as beautiful as you," Elijah said, then winced. "Too cheesy." "Definitely too cheesy," she agreed, laughing. They anchored at their secret island, just as the sun fully emerged, turning the ocean to gold. On the beach, Elijah had somehow arranged for a breakfast setup: white linens, champagne, fresh fruit, and flowers. "When did you do all this?" Chloe asked, amazed. "I have my ways," he said mysteriously. They ate in comfortable silence, watching the world wake up around them. Finally, as Chloe stood to explore the beach, Elijah caught her hand. "Chloe," he began, dropping to one knee in the sand. "Oh my God," she breathed. 18 months ago, You walked into my life needing help, but you ended up being the one who saved me from loneliness, from cynicism, from a half-lived life. You've made me better, happier, whole. Will you marry me? Will you be my partner in everything forever? Through tears, Chloe saw the ring, a stunning sapphire surrounded by diamonds, unique and perfect like their story. Yes, she said, dropping to her knees in front of him. Yes to everything, to forever, to partnership, to building a life together. Yes, Elijah. He slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then kissed her as the sun climbed higher, blessing their beginning. They stayed on the island for hours, planning their future between kisses and laughter. I want a small wedding, Chloe said. Just family and close friends. No massive production. Whatever you want, Elijah agreed. Though Mother might have opinions, they sailed back to Miami engaged, giddy with joy and possibility. The ring caught the light as Chloe steered the yacht, and Elijah couldn't stop staring at her. His fiancée, the woman who'd hidden behind him at an airport and ended up standing beside him as an equal. No regrets? He asked as they docked. Only one, Chloe said. I should have let you propose in the parking lot. The story would have been hilarious, he laughed, pulling her close. We have plenty of time to create hilarious stories. A lifetime, in fact. A lifetime, she agreed. The words a promise and a joy. What a journey from that desperate airport meeting to this perfect proposal. Do you believe in fate bringing people together, or was it just lucky coincidence? What's your take on their love story? Too fast or just right? Comment below with your thoughts. Eleanor Finn descended on Miami with the force of a hurricane, armed with bridal magazines and strong opinions. City club or waterfront? She asked within minutes of arrival. Church or beach? Spring or fall? Chloe looked overwhelmed, but Elijah intervened. Mother, breathe. We just got engaged last week. But Eleanor was unstoppable, and surprisingly, her enthusiasm was infectious. Soon, Chloe found herself enjoying the planning, especially with Eleanor's help, navigating the etiquette she'd never learned. You're the daughter I never had, Eleanor told her one afternoon, making Chloe cry. Thank you for bringing my son back to life. They settled on a fall wedding at Elijah's estate in the Keys, intimate but elegant. Chloe's family was small, just her parents and sister from Seattle, still bewildered by her transformation from Charles's victim to Elijah's beloved. He's nothing like Charles, her sister Amy observed after meeting Elijah. The way he looks at you. It's like you hung the moon, Chloe smiled, watching Elijah charm her traditionally reserved father with sailing stories. He makes me feel like I did, she admitted. The wedding planning brought them closer, each decision a small building block of their shared future. Elijah's bachelor party was typically unconventional. A sailing weekend with his closest friends and business associates. No strippers, no Vegas, no nonsense, he'd insisted. Just good friends and good wind. What he hadn't expected was for Charles to show up at the marina. Not threatening, but oddly subdued. I wanted to apologize, Charles said to the assembled group. To you, Elijah, for the trouble I caused. And to wish you well. Chloe deserves happiness. And it's clear you give her that. The encounter was surreal, but somehow fitting, the past making peace with the present. That was unexpected, Elijah's best man, David said after Charles left. Think he means it? Elijah considered. I think he's finally accepted reality. And honestly, I'm grateful to him, in a twisted way. If he hadn't been such a nightmare, Chloe wouldn't have been running through that airport, and I wouldn't have found the love of my life. The weekend proceeded peacefully, and Elijah found himself counting the days until he could call Chloe his wife. The boy who'd inherited a rusty ship had built an empire, but his greatest acquisition was about to be a simple gold band and the promise it represented. October in the Keys provided perfect weather, warm but not oppressive, with a gentle breeze off the ocean. Chloe stood before the mirror in her simple but elegant dress, hardly recognizing the confident woman staring back. "You look radiant," Amy said, adjusting her veil. "Like a woman in love." "I am," Chloe said simply. "So in love, it scares me sometimes." Her mother, finally warming to Elijah after seeing how he treated her daughter, squeezed her hand. "That's how it should feel. Scary and wonderful and absolutely right." Elijah waited at the altar, an arch of tropical flowers framing the ocean view behind him. When the music started and Chloe appeared, his composure cracked. Tears ran down his face as he watched his bride approach, glowing with happiness. "You okay?" David whispered. "Perfect," Elijah managed. "Everything's perfect." The ceremony was simple but meaningful, their vows personal and profound. "You gave me shelter when I needed it most," Chloe said. "But more than that, you gave me strength to shelter myself. I promise to be your port in every storm, your partner in every adventure, your home wherever we go." The reception was pure joy. Vivian Hartley, now a dear friend, gave a toast that had everyone laughing about their first yacht party encounter. "I knew then that Chloe was special," she said. Anyone who could make Elijah Finn smile at a boring shipping conference was clearly magical. Eleanor cried through her entire speech, managing to embarrass Elijah with childhood stories while welcoming Chloe officially to the family. Even Chloe's father, tongue loosened by champagne, admitted he'd been wrong to worry when she called to say she was marrying a billionaire she'd known for 2 weeks. "I thought history was repeating. But watching you two together, I see what my daughter saw from the beginning. You're home to each other." The first dance was to the song that had played during their beach club night in Key West, when they'd stopped pretending and started falling in love. "No regrets?" Elijah asked as they swayed together. "None," Chloe assured him. "Though I still think the parking lot proposal would have been a great story." He laughed, spinning her expertly. "I'll propose again in a parking lot for our anniversary if you want." "Deal," she agreed. "But for now, just dance with me. Husband." "Forever wife," he promised, and meant it. They honeymooned in Greece, sailing between islands on a chartered yacht. "Very on brand for us," Chloe teased as they anchored in a secluded cove. "Next you'll tell me you've bought a shipping route here." Elijah looked sheepish. "Actually, you didn't. It was a good investment." They laughed, swimming in crystal waters and making love on hidden beaches, building memories to last a lifetime. "I could do this forever," Chloe said one evening, watching the sunset from their deck. "Good thing that's what we signed up for," Elijah replied, pulling her close. The honeymoon was more than a vacation. It was a chance to just be together without work, without the past, without anything but each other. They talked about dreams, about children eventually, about the life they wanted to build. "I want to start a foundation," Chloe said one night, "for women escaping abusive relationships. Provide resources, safe houses, job training. What I needed when I was running." Elijah kissed her temple. "We'll do it together. The Finn Foundation has a nice ring to it." They returned home sun-kissed. closer than ever, ready to begin their married life properly. The first year of marriage flew by in a blur of adjustments and adventures. Chloe left the trade publication to run the newly established Finn Foundation, pouring her energy into helping women like herself. Elijah supported her completely, even when it meant she worked long hours and came home emotionally drained. "You're saving lives," he reminded her on particularly hard days. "That's worth everything?" The foundation grew quickly, partnering with law enforcement and shelters across Florida. Chloe's own story, shared carefully and strategically, inspired donors and survivors alike. Their personal life flourished alongside their professional endeavors. They hosted dinner parties that mixed shipping executives with social workers, creating unlikely connections and partnerships. "You've humanized me," Elijah told her after one particularly successful evening. "My reputation has completely transformed. I'm no longer the cold billionaire. I'm the man lucky enough to be married to Chloe Finn." She smiled, still getting used to her new name. "We've humanized each other. I was just as closed off, just in a different way. We saved each other. It was their constant refrain, their truth, their foundation." 2 years into marriage, Chloe discovered she was pregnant. She'd suspected for weeks, but waited to be sure before telling Elijah. She found him in his home office, reviewing contracts, and wordlessly placed the positive test on his desk. He stared at it for a long moment, then at her, then back at the test. "Really?" he whispered. "Really," she confirmed. The contracts forgotten, Elijah swept her into his arms, laughing and crying simultaneously. "A baby. We're having a baby," Chloe agreed, tears streaming down her own face. The pregnancy was smooth but transformative. Elijah became even more protective, if possible, researching everything from prenatal vitamins to the best crib manufacturers. "You're going to be an amazing father," Chloe told him, as he assembled the nursery furniture with intense concentration. "I had a good example," he said. "My stepfather showed me what a real man looks like. Patient, kind, supportive. Everything I want to be for our child. They decided not to find out the gender, wanting one surprise in their carefully planned life. Boy or girl, they'll be loved," Elijah said, painting the nursery a cheerful yellow. "So loved they'll never doubt it for a second." Their daughter arrived on a stormy September night, as dramatic as her parents' meeting. "Of course she'd come during a hurricane," Elijah said, trying to stay calm as they rushed to the hospital. Labor was long and difficult, but Chloe was fierce, and Elijah never left her side. When Sophia Eleanor Finn finally entered the world, screaming and perfect, both parents wept. "She's beautiful," Elijah breathed, holding his daughter for the first time. "She's ours," Chloe corrected, exhausted but radiant. "Our little miracle." Parenthood changed them both. Elijah, who'd run board meetings with military precision, was reduced to Googling, "Why do babies cry at 3 a.m.? Chloe, who'd faced down stalkers and rebuilt her life, was terrified of trimming tiny fingernails. But they figured it out together, supporting each other through sleepless nights and milestone moments. "She has your eyes," Chloe said one morning, watching Sophia track Elijah's movements. "Poor thing," Elijah joked. "Let's hope she has your spirit." "Our spirit," Chloe corrected. "Combined, we're unstoppable." When Sophia was 2, they decided to try for another child. This time, the journey was harder. A miscarriage that devastated them both. Months of trying. The stress of hope and disappointment. "Maybe Sophia's enough," Chloe said one night after another negative test. "She's more than enough," Elijah agreed. "But if you want to keep trying, I'm here. If you want to stop, I'm here. Whatever you need." His unwavering support, so different from Charles's conditional love, still amazed her years later. They got their miracle on Sophia's 3rd birthday. twins. Of course, Elijah laughed at the ultrasound. We never do anything halfway. Alexander and Isabella joined their family in a chaos of bottles and diapers and overwhelming love. Watching Sophia kiss her baby siblings, Chloe marveled at the life they'd built. Remember when you were hiding behind me at the airport? Elijah asked one evening, all three children finally asleep. Look at us now. Best split-second decision ever, Chloe agreed. Using you as a human shield. Being used as a human shield, he corrected, and they laughed quietly, not wanting to wake the babies. The Finn Foundation had become a national model for supporting abuse survivors. Chloe testified before Congress about the need for better resources, her story inspiring legislative change. I'm so proud of you, Elijah told her after a particularly powerful speech. You've taken your pain and transformed it into purpose. The Foundation's annual gala had become the social event of the season in Miami, raising millions for shelters and programs. Even Charles, now genuinely reformed and married with children of his own, donated anonymously each year. Do you ever think about how different life could have been? Chloe asked Elijah one night as they reviewed Foundation reports. If I hadn't been at that airport, if you hadn't been bored enough to help. Elijah pulled her close. I'd try not to. The thought of missing this, you, our children, the work we do together, it's unbearable. That airport moment was fate, destiny, whatever you want to call it. The universe putting us exactly where we needed to be. Chloe smiled, remembering the terrified woman she'd been. The universe has a twisted sense of humor. The best kind, Elijah agreed. 10 years after that fateful airport encounter, they returned to Miami International for a Foundation event. Standing in the same first-class lounge where they'd met, now renovated but still recognizable, Chloe felt the past and present collide. Hard to believe it all started here, she mused. A desperate woman and a bored billionaire. Elijah wrapped his arms around her from behind. A brave woman and a lonely man, more like. We just didn't know it yet. The event honored survivors who'd rebuilt their lives. And Chloe spoke about transformation, about angels appearing in unexpected places, about the power of choosing hope even when running scared. Mommy, is this where you met Daddy? Sophia asked, now 7 and precocious. It is, sweetheart, Chloe confirmed. I was scared and running, and Daddy helped me. Like a prince, Sophia declared. Elijah laughed. More like a pirate. I had selfish reasons too, but Sophia shook her head. Pirates become princes in all the best stories. Out of the mouths of babes, Chloe thought, watching her husband charm their daughter. He'd indeed transformed from someone taking advantage of a situation to her true partner, her real prince. Their story had become legend in their circles. The billionaire who'd offered shelter and found love. The frightened woman who'd needed protection and become a protector herself. They still sailed regularly, still danced at beach clubs, still looked at each other with wonder that this was their life. Any regrets? Elijah asked on their 15th anniversary, echoing their constant question. They were on his yacht, anchored at their proposal island, their teenagers complaining about the lack of Wi-Fi while the twins built sandcastles. Just one, Chloe said, and Elijah raised an eyebrow. I still think you should have proposed in that parking lot. The story would have been better, he laughed, pulling her close, as their children groaned at their parents' affection. I love you, Chloe Finn. Thank you for using me as your human shield. Thank you for letting me, she replied, and for becoming my shield for real. They kissed as the sun set, their children making exaggerated gagging noises, their love story complete but still continuing. The scared woman at the airport and the bored billionaire had found their happily ever after, and it was more beautiful than either had dared to dream. In the end, hiding from her past had led Chloe straight to her future, and Elijah's momentary cure for boredom had become his life's greatest adventure. Sometimes the best love stories began with desperation and opportunity colliding in the first-class lounge of an airport, creating magic from the mundane, forever from a fleeting moment of human kindness. That wraps up today's story, family. Tell me, what's the biggest lesson you'll carry away from this? Let's talk in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications because we've got more stories coming your way every week. Until then, stay blessed.